Good afternoon, everybody. Oh, last time I was in the classroom, I told a joke and all I got was crickets. So I just want to make sure everybody's out there and engaged. Okay.
Getting them warmed up. That's good.
And woke up, yeah. Okay. It is really a great honor for me to introduce our speaker for the Tom Foster Lecture this year. Little prerequisite kind of thing here. Scott is the son of Dr. Tom Foster, in case some of you might not have put that together. And I have been blessed knowing this family for a long, long time. Mary Jo, good to see you. Megan, it's good to see you again. You don't get down here every year, and I was really so excited when I heard you were going to be here. And then the family's here, and I won't go through all those introductions because they said keep this to 2 or 3 minutes, and that's why I had to make some notes because I could talk on and on about these guys. Anyway, to get down to business here, Scott Foster, our speaker today, is a graduate of Center College and the University of Kentucky College of Pharmacy. Upon completion of his PharmD, Scott immediately joined Janssen Pharmaceutical, Johnson & Johnson, to embark on what has now been a 25-year career with J&J North America Pharmaceuticals Enterprise. Scott's current role with J&J is as National Sales Director, Immunology, leading a critical launch of Tremfya to support patients suffering with inflammatory bowel disease. In his prior role with Immunology, he led a large key account management team in the institutional and biological account space to support patient access to Janssen Biotech life-changing biological portfolios that included drugs like Stelara, Tremfya, and Remicade, and others.
Of course.
Pretty impressive. Okay. Prior to this role, Scott has led in multiple sales, marketing, and leadership excellent roles of increasing responsibility, where he has established a strong reputation across J&J as a strategic leader, a brand innovator, and a highly engaged coach and leader who can inspire and motivate teams to achieve uncommon outcomes in support of patients living with the burden of disease. Now, that run-on sentence, I was sitting there reading that, I'm going, this sounds a lot like his dad. So if I may use the term chip off the old block, yeah. I'm going to use it.
So we referenced the DNA up here. That's yeah. good call out.
So anyway, Scott currently resides in Doylestown, Pennsylvania with his wife, Courtney, and 3 children, Jack, Van, and Jane, who are all here today. And so without any further ado, I turn the microphone over to our speaker today, Dr. Scott Foster.
Excellent, Dr. Recker. Thank you. First off, thank you for taking time over lunch. It is not lost on me that this is your time, and my intention is to help shed some light on the legacy of this institution, certainly the legacy of Tom Foster, but also to give you some perspective about my career, which has been a diverse one, and perhaps, if not definitively different from my father's and many of you in terms of what you aspire to do. I am chronically recruiting for great talent into Johnson & Johnson, so I'm looking at all of you as subjects for recruitment as well. But it is an absolute privilege and honor, and thank you to Dean Guy for the selection as the awardee for the Tom Foster Lectureship. Having been to many of these lectureships in the past with many peers of my father, having seen and listened to their tributes, it's emotional for me to be back, but is also incredibly inspiring as I think about the shoulders of giants that we all get to stand upon as we take the University College of Pharmacy to the next era of leadership. Now, I also want to welcome the people online. It's good to know that we have a live and a virtual presence today. I hope you guys can hear me okay, but I'll never know one way or another. So if somebody can let me know whether or not that's working, that would be great. Let me first start with saying that, as Dr. Record mentioned, I'm from Doylestown, Pennsylvania, but home is Kentucky. Home is Kentucky. When people ask me, even after 25 years with Johnson & Johnson, and I left a week after graduation and joined Johnson & Johnson in the sales and marketing commercial leader in the commercial leader track, when anybody asks me where I'm from, Lexington, Kentucky is always that answer. That's what I mean about the DNA. And DNA in this institution is truly, it's not just from being a student here, it's from literally growing up with the leaders that have created these walls. And I'm looking at many of them right now. Dr. Record, who I've known probably since I was 5 years old. Right, exactly right. Bob Kuhn, Lance, Joe and Renee Fink, and Dan Wormling, I can't call out everybody, but just seeing you, thank you for being here. I think we can also rest assured, and I'll share a story here in a minute, that very confident that Tom Foster is in the room with us as well. So that's a bit of a tease. I'll tell you why I believe that to be the case here in a second. Now, it's also not lost on me that as I was building these slides, this is obtuse color red for this particular room, correct? That's also hard on me. Our J&J red is not my favorite color. We recently transitioned from a multi-dimensional company. We had a med tech sector, we have a consumer sector, and a pharmaceutical sector where we have decentralized to where now we are just a pharmaceutical and a med tech. And I shouldn't say just, that was all part of a strategic choice. And we pulled all of our enterprises under the Johnson & Johnson name, whereas it used to be, as you heard in my introduction, it was Janssen or Janssen Biotech. Now we are all Johnson & Johnson, leveraging the legacy of our leadership as the largest, and I would argue the most influential healthcare company in the world. But what I want to talk about today is the journey that I know all of you are on, because I can empathize. I know exactly where you are. I've been there. I've made the transition. I know the challenges, but I can assure you it's how you challenge yourself in the crucible you're in today that is going to create the opportunities for you for tomorrow. I am a byproduct of that and excited to share some of the stories. But again, back to the DNA. So my dad started here 40 years ago, and I'll put up a picture here in a second, but I literally remember this place to the tune of being able to, like, being 5 to 10 years old and going to the drug evaluation unit. I remember the taste of the orange juice. Anybody remember the orange juice on the drug evaluation unit? I remember the smell of the dry erase marker in my dad's office. I remember the smell of the alcohol swabs again on the drug evaluation unit. All these things that are conditioning me without me knowing it, because pharmacy was never a guarantee for me. But I knew in my first or second year as a biology major at Center College, just 45 minutes down the road, the pharmacy was, in fact, my calling. Now, what I didn't realize is that within that calling, I was going to take a very diverse career path that was entirely different from my father's. But I look back on it now, 25 years later, and I feel so blessed for the leadership that people instilled in me that I can hopefully share just a couple of pearls with you today to think about how you can accelerate your own in the future. I'm going to chalk this up to if you know, you know. Raise your hands if you're familiar with Waylon Jennings and Willie Nelson. Got it? Can anybody fill in, Mama, don't let your babies grow up to be what? Yeah, it's half and half, right? Half of you are, Mama, don't let your babies grow up to be cowboys. The other half who know, Mama, don't let your babies grow up to be PharmDs. My parents did not do very well at that. I'm proud to be a PharmD, but this is, back to Ken Record. This is back one of my core memories. I can remember singing the song, having no idea who sang it, but literally driving around in the backseat of Mom and Dad's car, Mama, don't let your baby. So I'm not going to burden you with my voice, but that's how it all started. And ultimately, growing up to be a PharmD is definitely in our foster family DNA. And to know that, you need to know who my father was, whom I'm incredibly proud of. My dad passed away 15 years ago this year, in 2010, which is still hard for me to believe as well. I'm not shy to say this, and I wouldn't have said it when I was a student because I didn't have the emotional intelligence enough to do it. But he, amongst others in this room, are absolute giants in this space. Pioneering solutions, creating opportunities for others, and truly living into leadership and mentorship that has created an entirely new value chain for the pharmacy, for pharmacists nationwide. Now that sounded hyperbolic, but I can guarantee you there wasn't an ounce of hyperbole in the actuals of just the the walls that have been built by the titans that have come and the giants that have come through this space. He, like I and my mother, which is ironic, but I'll share with you this, right? In terms of loyalty, he was with J&J, I'm sorry, he was with UK for 40 years. My mother taught at the exact same institution for 38. Oh, there you are. 38 years, and I've been with the same institution for 25. Now, some may say, you know, why didn't you test the waters elsewhere? There's value in loyalty. There's value in that connective tissue that you can create within an organization if truly you are delivering value. And that's the challenge I'm going to put out to all of you. And it doesn't mean you have to start and stay and work at the exact same place when you graduate from this great place, but you could think about how you could build a long-term career, whether it's through a corporation, whether it's through an integrated system, whether it's through as an academician. Doesn't matter how you do it, but there's certainly opportunity that comes from this pharmacy space. And he certainly lived into this. He was with UK College of Pharmacy for 40 years and ultimately built relationships within these walls, but also nationwide, that I'm incredibly proud to say that has helped shape my approach as a leader within Johnson & Johnson. Some areas of particular focus. He was deeply interested in pioneering solutions for patients, deeply interested in that. He was a longtime chair of the Institutional Review Board of the University of Kentucky. So his impact beyond pharmacy was ensuring that there were compliant, there were ethical, and there was rigor behind the studies that would be delivered as part of the UK enterprise here. And when I visit with people across the UK healthcare system, everybody knew Tom Foster for not just his aptitude, but more importantly, his attitude, how he partnered, how he created opportunity for others. R13. So this is a picture of many leaders that came before us, right? So my mom and dad moved here in 1970. As part of this process, it was great. My sister, my mom and I, we got on the phone, we talked, we shared memories and just kind of pulled back some scars, if you will, of just how much we missed my dad over the past 15 years. And you can see on his face, maybe not on the picture on the left, he's awful serious over there on the left, but I think that's part of part of the persona, a little bit of how seriously he took that as R13. But they moved here kind of at risk, right? From upstate New York, two people who barely knew where Kentucky was, had opportunity to either go to University of Michigan or come to University of Kentucky, and ultimately, because of the leadership of others, made that very bold decision to come down from Buffalo, New York, to Lexington, Kentucky, where they've lived and stayed for the rest of their lives. And the question might be, why, right? And again, it's back to standing on the shoulders of the giants that built this place, and there probably isn't a bigger giant than this gentleman right here, who I even remember very, very well in terms of when I was a child, Paul Parker. Everybody remember Paul Parker or know the name Paul Parker? Because if you don't, I urge you to Google him. Because Paul Parker is probably, if not definitively, the father of clinical pharmacy. Everything that you're going through today and everything that we do as representatives of our degree, you could argue he is the most or one of the most influential leaders that have created the legacy of the University of Kentucky. And it was Paul Parker who recruited many of those giants that I'm referencing, including my father, to this place, ultimately resulting in the leadership and the mentorship that he was able to demonstrate. I think they emulated and they turned it around and paid it right back in kind. And I wanted to highlight the Paul Parker Award winners. These are the Paul Parker Award winners on the website right now through 2023. Who won in 2024? Thank you. But congratulations to these folks. Read the names, right? Read the names, and then you know these are the people who pioneered excellence, led with effectiveness, and ultimately created an entirely new space of opportunity, either as a resident or a conduit of the college. And my dad, I would argue this was probably, even of many awards that he received, at least from my memory, right? 1992, I was graduating from high school in 1992. He was the third award winner after Paul Parker and Charles Bolton. He was so proud of winning the Paul Parker Award. So proud of winning that award. Not for hubris, but because of his mentor, Paul Parker himself. I took a picture right up top of that this morning. That still sits on the mantle in his office today of his award that I believe helps establish, again, that visionary leader and consummate mentor attitude that he emulated from Paul Parker himself. All right, to understand Tom Foster, you also have to understand what was his life outside of the classroom. What did he care about? Because him as an academician was a fraction of who he was just as an exemplary human being. He was an early adopter of everything. If you tried to beat him to any technology, he would already pull it out of his pocket and say, nice try, right? Top left-hand corner, the Casio calculator watch. Yeah, right, seems archaic because it is. The Palm Pilot, anybody remember the Palm Pilot? Yeah, I'd like to see a couple of nods. And then the iPhone. All three of these things, certainly part of his brand, part of his DNA, to be front and center. He had an engineer's mind, meaning he was chronically thinking about going to the next step, bringing the best, whether it's in himself. He was never the smartest person in the room, but he had this ability to take his attitude and then turn it into action. He was an action-oriented human being, which you then could see in the middle. He was an avid sailor, and grew up here on the East Coast, in Kentucky, going to Cave Run Lake. He bought his first couple of sailboats. And then in 8th grade, my parents bought their place up in upstate New York, and this is where he was at his happiest, with himself, his dogs, or his grandchildren sailing on the daily. And he was world famous for it. And the third piece was bow ties. Bow ties. You guys ever seen any of the bow ties around the College of Pharmacy? I can confidently say that he implemented that a little earlier, perhaps, than the rest of the world was ready. And I will tell you, when I was a student, I wasn't particularly ready for the bow ties. Like, why the hell do we have to be wearing bow ties? Can we just cool it up and wear a regular tie, please? But in hindsight, it's an absolute hallmark of his legacy in not conforming and saying, I will pioneer this for the future. And here we are today with bow ties, perhaps even more preferable than collar ties in most places. Now, I'll tell you a little bit of a story. You just got to bear with me, because if you don't believe, it's okay, because I didn't believe either. But has anybody here ever been to a medium? Anybody ever been to a medium? This is why I know he's here. Okay, thank you. If you don't believe in a medium, let me just tell you this. I didn't either. But about 3 months ago, I went to a medium, and it wasn't for me. I was a guest on this trip. I was with my wife, and I was with my mother-in-law, and I was just kind of the third person there to listen to see what happened, and kind of went in with an open mind. But certainly, it was just about that. It was an open mind, but probably more skeptical than optimistic that anything was going to happen. Immediately upon walking in the room, and my wife could back me up on this, the medium says, "Whoa." She looked right at me in the eye, and she said, "I need you to sit right over here, like something is happening." And this is the God's honest truth. I'm going to give you a 30-second version here. She goes, I've never experienced anybody quite as present, any spirit quite as present as this person on a sailboat in a bow tie right now. That is the truth. That visit to that medium has helped me understand he has been with us all along and still watching. And there was probably a dozen other references that make me know that he is with us today, which gives me great calm and confidence, especially if you've also lost someone before my dad was 63 years old when he passed. He was working straight up to the day that he passed away, but definitely a comforting to know that he still knows that we love him and that we're with him every single day as well. So back to that kind of pioneering new solutions, that engineering's mind, right? This is one of his calling cards in terms of what he has delivered to the pharmaceutical space and to patient benefit. Patient-controlled analgesia. As part of that drug evaluation unit, chronically challenging the status quo about how you deliver better patient outcomes, especially in pain management. And he, amongst others, I'll look at Dan Wormeling in the room, were instrumental in the development and implementation of patient-controlled analgesia, which still is part of the standard of care today. So this is just a perfect example of who he was, how he was, and ultimately how he delivered, and a pretty clear representation that I don't even know what year this was. Dan, what year do you think this was with the bow tie here? 78? Bow tie in 78? Okay, interesting. Anyway, but I hope your takeaway is he was an absolute champion for patients in many ways. I referenced the Paul Parker Award. I also want to emphasize this, right? As a servant service-based leader, and that was my dad's calling card. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a second. This was the last award that he was ever bestowed as a clinical pharmacist. And it's the Beale Award, which is one of the highest honors to the U.S. Pharmacopeia. And as you can see here, he was an avid volunteer at USP in helping advance standards across the country. I know there's a lot to read here, but again, in the emphasis of understanding the context of how these walls were built, ultimately 2010 USP Beale Award winner, he was very, very proud of this. And ultimately his last award because he passed away about 6 months later. So in that picture, probably more sick than he was letting on with the insidious kind of nature of pancreatic cancer, which is what he passed away from. But you can still see on his face the pride that he has in that particular award, knowing how much USP means to him. And love what we see up here on the top left. That picture sits in the USP today. So if you ever visit USP in Washington, D.C., please take a look. Love it when people send us this picture, just like my mom posted here on Twitter many, many years ago. Okay. I'm going to transition now to a little bit more about my beliefs that were instilled in me from this institution. And I'm going to talk a lot about leadership and mentorship, which is how this lectureship was originally built, was emphasizing the importance of leadership, the importance of mentorship, and the intentionality it takes for both. Let me ask this question to the audience, and just raise your hand. You don't need to chime up here, but what is a natural born leader? Is there such a thing as a natural born leader? Raise your hand if you agree yes. Yeah. I'm actually going to argue that I don't think there is such a thing as a natural born leader, because I think leadership can be built over time. So I baited you into that. Clearly baited you into that. I think there are inherent characteristics in our DNA that can be unlocked, but ultimately it's a learned characteristic that takes intentionality. And these are my fundamental beliefs as to how I've been able to navigate my career with J&J over the past 25 years to now leading a team of multiple hundreds in the biologic space in immunology, which is our largest business sector in the pharmaceutical enterprise, is that it takes intentionality in both leadership and mentorship to make this happen. And my point of emphasis that I would challenge all of you to think about as you continue to grow and unlock your own potential as future leaders is think laterally and not vertically. Lateral leadership is the key. Vertical leadership is just autocratic, right? It's just title. And title means nothing without the followership that comes from effective leadership styles. And there are many. And it would take a 10-second Google search to realize there's autocratic leadership, democratic, transformational, situational, servant, service-based. There's tons of different leadership styles that are required depending upon the situation and depending upon the character. But ultimately, I believe it's the servant, service-based leader that I have most emulated from my father. And I think that is ultimately activated in what you just saw in the USP piece, where that's certainly not for profit. That was for volunteerism, as everybody else who navigates through the USP. And when I think about leadership, I think about three core characteristics that I want to leave you with. But before we do that, can I get one volunteer to come to the front of the room with me right now? One volunteer to stand up next to me for a few seconds, please. Come on up. Excellent. What's your name? Peter? Scott Foster. Pleasure to meet you. All right. I'm not going to make you sing or dance, so I promise. So you can sit back down. All I'm emphasizing is that it takes one person to have the courage that Peter just had to stand up in front of his peers, right? So the first word I would say, thank you. That's all I needed, was just to prove a point. All right. To prove a point that courage just takes an N of 1. I am sure when I asked that question of anybody having a volunteer moment to stand up, everybody went to fight or flight. Like, whoa, where's this going? What does this mean? But my challenge to you is to activate the courage. Activate in your own self whatever it's going to take to be able to embrace the unknown, because what I can guarantee you, even in your experience here in the College of Pharmacy or your experience immediately after, is there are going to be courageous moments every single day that you're going to need to lead through. And the more you're able to step to and walk to instead of retreat from, that's what's going to build your leadership characteristics over time. So that's the attitude piece, right? Attitude wins everything. The second piece is about a concept that I call getting to neutral. Getting to neutral, right? Oftentimes we reference negativity, positivity. I believe the key to effective leadership, especially lateral leadership, is in times of stress, can you get yourself to neutral? Again, the human brain, and this is the truth. Again, very simple Google search if you don't believe me. We have 60 to 80,000 conscious thoughts a day. What percentage of those thoughts do you believe are negative? Negative. 80%. That's in our DNA. That's in our human code. 60 to 80,000 conscious thoughts a day, and our fight or flight response is taking over on 80% of those, saying, I don't feel good about this. The challenge I'll throw out to you is, how can you get yourself to neutral? How can you get to a yes and proposition instead of a either or proposition? Take the challenges your professors throw out to you. Take the challenges that your friends throw out to you, and ultimately get yourself into a what's possible, into a future orientation instead of a contextual orientation that typically drives negative. And the third piece around attitude is around belief. Belief in yourself, right? Belief is nothing more than something you say to yourself over and over again, in some cases to make it true or to create it to be true. So when you add up those three pieces, the courage to try new things, the ability to get yourself to a neutral mindset, ultimately to navigate to positive later, and then also build your own belief, those are the attitudinal pieces that create magnetism. And that's all leadership is magnetism, is people seeing you for whatever characteristic it is that I can follow that. And what I can all but guarantee you is aptitude will only take you so far. Aptitude will only take you so far. The attitude can take you as far as you want to go. That much I promise. And the second piece is around mentorship. Mentorship is a far simpler concept, but it shouldn't be distilled in such a simple way where we don't think about the basics of how to be an effective mentor, right? The first piece around mentorship is intentionality. If you are a mentor or you are a mentee, and I think, as I'm looking at many people in this room that have challenged me and I've been challenged by over the course of my career and over the course of my student career, they were intentional. They were always there. They're here today. Think about that for a second. They are here today on a random Thursday at noontime to learn something about, these are the people I'm looking at here in the front row, to learn something about somebody they know very, very well already, perhaps from a different perspective as a son, but they're here as mentors, they're here as leaders, and they're here because they are the giants on the shoulders of which I got to stand. And I challenge you with that intentionality is, how do you create the same for people that you'll be mentoring in the future? It takes intentionality for that to come to fruition in a meaningful way. So as referenced, I joined J&J 25 years ago and have had 12 different roles of increasing responsibilities over the course of my career. You heard a little bit of my bio. Right now, I have the privilege of leading what has been stated as the most important launch to set the trajectory of our J&J pharmaceutical business for the next 10 years. Apologies if that sounds like hubris. But as we say, if pressure is a privilege, consider me the most privileged person in the world. But we do have a very big responsibility in the immunology business that I'm incredibly proud of as we built our culture, as we build our leadership, knowing that we are 700 people strong, out addressing provider needs and patient needs to access very challenging and complex medications in the biologic space. But I joined Johnson & Johnson because of the fact that we are a credo-based organization with a very strong reputation, certainly not a perfect organization. There is no perfect corporation. But the fact that I've been with this company for 25 years, I can tell you, as I've invested in the company's invested in me. And to those who are thinking about a career in the industry, I want me to be a proof point that 25 years with one enterprise is possible, and it can be incredibly appreciated, right? Loyalty, there is such thing as loyalty in the manufacturer space. Now, when I think about how we recruit, this is where I'm going to kind of move to the recruit phase of if you haven't thought about the industry, right? It does take also intentionality to explore opportunities within the industry. There are so many different channels because the one thing that I fundamentally am positive of is that PharmDs versus, for example, somebody with an MBA, and in some cases, if you have a PharmD and an MBA, brings such an ecosystem mindset to healthcare delivery. Patient-centric, understanding how all systems work. And I intentionally put up the word chart because there are so many different pieces of the value chain that pharmacists can touch. We see pharmacists within J&J as the greatest experts in product fulfillment of anybody. And we see the game changer elements that they can provide because of the fact that they see end to end in that value chain, as I was referencing. Over the course of my career with Johnson & Johnson, I've had the privilege and honor, like I said, in taking lateral roles to build breadth and depth of aptitude and skills, but also vertical roles. I'm proud to say that I, like I said, I get to lead now a large team across the country that's responsible for what is the most important launch, and I put Tremfya there in the beginning, in the middle. But this is a host of life-changing brands over the course of my 25 years with the company in the neuroscience space, with persistent mental illness, with schizophrenia, as well as treatment-resistant depression. Was instrumental in, several years ago in operationalizing the first ever nasal spray of esketamine, which is an enantiomer of ketamine, right, for treatment-resistant depression. And as you can imagine, the complexity of trying to operationalize and commercialize an asset with the word ketamine in it takes a great deal of fortitude because of the fact that we were up against significant headwinds from the FDA with a risk evaluation and mitigation strategy that really challenged us to partner with the healthcare community to build this operational structure from the ground up. But this is just some examples of the brands that over time we've had the opportunity to deliver. And this is a reference point from just several weeks ago. As mentioned, we are in the middle of what is one of the most critical launches in the history of J&J. And again, I know that sounds like hyperbole, but I'm incredibly proud of what we are doing for patients living with inflammatory bowel disease, which affects 1% to 2% of the population. So it is not, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis is not rare disease. And we need to challenge the entire clinical community to do better and to move to advanced mechanisms of action, similar as we have here with Tremfya. Some additional context on opportunities across the industry, depending upon what your particular strength is, right? We do have a mantra at J&J. We want people to lead with your strengths. I don't anticipate that everybody's going to go into the industry in a commercial space similar as I have and stay in the commercial space. I found it incredibly rewarding for my career, but it's not for everybody. But when you look at research and development, medical affairs, commercial roles, as I have taken, and regulatory affairs, a diverse and host of opportunities. Again, to call out, I've had 12 roles in 25 years. So if you like diversity, if you like the challenge of doing new things, and again, approaching with courage, just as my friend did here when he stood up, this could be the opportunity for you as you navigate the future, and happy to address any questions about how to enter the industry for anybody who may want to stay after the lecture. Whoops. And lastly, I am very, very proud to prove that the DNA continues. As my son, Jack Foster, I'm sure right now his adrenaline is popping up right now, is going to be a class of 2025 graduate in Lexington, Virginia from Washington and Lee, and will be PY1 next year at the University of Kentucky. Jack, welcome home. Congratulations. And it shouldn't go unstated, Dad and Mama want our baby to grow up to be a PharmD just like Waylon and Jennings and Ken Record would have intended. But with that, everybody, it's been a privilege and an honor to be able to represent my father today. Beyond just his professional, I hope what you were able to pick up. He was a grandfather, he was a father, he was a husband, he was a leader, he was a mentor, and he was a true pioneer in this space. And leave you with his parting words that were part of his personal brand. Keep the faith, and appreciate everybody and your time today, and happy to take any questions after the lecture as well. Thank you. So to that end, are there any? We've got a little bit of time here, but I also want to be respectful as you know, everybody's going to be bouncing to the next opportunity for the day. Any questions that I can address either about my father, my career, the industry, anything? I'm at your disposal. Jessica. Yep. That is a great question, and probably one I should have better addressed in the lecture itself. I will say that yeah. So the question for those on Zoom was, how difficult was it for me to kind of carve into this new path into the industry, which was certainly reflective of all the training that you get here in the PharmD curriculum, but a slightly diverse path and very different than the path that my father had taken, obviously, from the time he came here 40 years ago until he passed away in 2010. And I will say it does, similar as I've referenced, it takes intentionality, and it was the same thing for me 29 years ago. I realized a couple of years in where I had a bit more of a business bent, a bit more of a commercial bent, but it didn't change any way I prepared. It changed how I intended to navigate into the space. So one of the best things I think you can do if you do have an interest in the industry is identify and secure an internship. And that was the biggest game changer for me. Is after my second year, after my PY2 year, I moved up to Chicago, did an internship in pharmacovigilance and regulatory affairs, completely contradictory to what I've done with my actual career, but it opened my eyes to what's possible again. And I think the other piece that was a game changer for me in my second year, and I look at Aaron Cook, who's my classmate, maybe this was third year, was finding the courage to lead for the first time. Leadership was not behaviorally innate to me in undergrad, and it didn't really start until I became the president of the Kentucky American Pharmaceutical Association chapter, essentially, which is, I believe, what you call CAPS today. Is that correct? So it would be the equivalent of the CAPS president. And it was the entire student body. It was an opportunity to do exactly what I'm doing now, and to find the courage to stand up in front of my peers and harness the adrenaline and push it down where it needs to go and find ways to lead from the front. And with those two pieces, ultimately, it helped me kind of navigate into my first role, as mentioned, about a week after graduation, moving up to New Jersey for the first time. But it just so happened I just got married to my beautiful wife, Courtney, and we were able to move back closer to where she was originally from as well, which worked out perfectly. Yes.
Drug companies be able to advertise prescription drugs, and he thought they should not.
Yep.
Today, the people can't even imagine not having that. And how do you think that has changed the company dealing with their medication?
Yeah, great question. And you could probably argue that argument still exists on a 50-50. So the question is, how has direct consumer advertising which has been kind of a staple of the industry for the past several years. And I'm sure if you haven't, I hope the next time you see our Tremfya commercial for Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis that you remember this conversation. I can see both sides of the argument just like everybody else. But our responsibility as a manufacturer is to be fair balance in the information that we put out and to ensure that we meet every regulatory standard, to ensure that we are informing the consumer in a fair and compliant way to help drive positive behavior and not negative behavior. And I think there are still many spaces, and I would argue the space that I work in right now, but also severe and persistent mental illness, is there are so many innovations that require habit change. And that's our responsibility as a manufacturer, especially as we bring superior evidence to the table, that we have a responsibility to demonstrate and inform consumers. But we don't inform consumers in a way where we expect them to demand product. We expect them to ask and to be informed in their decision-making just like everybody else. But we intend for that to be a shared decision-making process with their clinician, just as shared decision-making was intended. But I think it raises the standard of what we are responsible for as a manufacturer to ensure that we are informing in a fair, balanced, compliant, but also informative way so that people can make better decisions based upon the evidence that exists that they may not have been aware of. Yep. Yep.
In that, we're all making a decision. It's surprising when you go to the doctor and they say, well, you could do this or you could do that. And people are like, you're not going to tell me what to do, and more people hopefully are in depth in their healthcare.
Where I think you get better outcomes when patients are more invested in their health outcomes based upon being informed and not just being mandated to a particular treatment, especially chronic treatments that they may be on for the rest of their life. The chances of persistency leading to true effectiveness and remission downstream, I think, go up exponentially. It's when somebody gets told to do something, right, against their will. And that's truly indicative in the severe and persistent mental illness space, is especially when they aren't aware of their illness with diseases like schizophrenia. They have, they don't have insight to their disease. Ultimately, that medicine could be a punishment if they're not enrolled in shared decision-making, just as you say. Great question. Yes.
Pharmacy benefit managers are very much in legislative eye.
That they are.
And a number of your products, I would assume, are special pharma products.
Almost entirely. Yeah.
So how do you now perceive the trends of where things are headed with the intersection of these products and pharmacy benefit management?
Yeah, it's a great question. So PBMs, pharmacy benefit managers, are a major constituent that we need to navigate and effectively contract with to ensure that they create fair and open access to the products that we manufacture. And ultimately, that is a very sophisticated and elegant dance that we have with these PBMs over time to ensure that we give them enough value that they can transfer to the patient. Now, it doesn't always happen that way. It doesn't always happen that way. And what I will tell you is in some cases, the manufacturer is the bad actor. And in some cases, it's the PBM that is the bad actor. But it's the responsibility of all of us to understand that there has to be fair profit for both sides, right? Certainly, I'm not here to dispel this myth. We as Johnson & Johnson, we are a for-profit organization. If you're an investor in Johnson & Johnson, I think it's important for you to know that that's important to me in how I think and how I act as a commercial leader, but with pharmacy in my DNA. That's why I reference DNA. And I get that question all the time is, did you kind of walk away from clinical pharmacy? Because I didn't walk away from clinical pharmacy. Clinical pharmacy is in every single decision I make every single day because of the DNA that was built here. But the navigation from manufacturer through PBM, through major payer, through all the contracting, ultimately needs to ensure that everybody has fair profit upstream, but downstream that every patient that could be eligible, whether government pay or commercial pay, can afford and stay on treatment, especially if our outcomes are being able to demonstrate superiority versus a prior innovator. Great question. Yes. Yeah, great question. I'm going to pull my wife up here to answer that question. No, no, yeah, she's very pleased with that question. And I think the second piece of mentorship that I didn't reference in terms of, and also leadership, is being present, right? And I will be the first one to tell you, and it's why I kind of joke, I'm not always present. I'm certainly try to be present every day at work, but you got to find a way to make sure that your tank is full enough when you get home that you can be present with your family as well. That's a life lesson, regardless of how much pressure you have in your job or how much responsibility you have in your job. It's always thinking about how you're showing up on both sides. But ultimately, if I didn't have the support of my family, and that's why I'm so blessed to have everybody here. And I know that Dr. Record introduced everybody. My son Van from Furman University, my son Jack, who everybody just met from Slide, my sister Meg, my wife Courtney, my daughter Jane, my mom. Just even being here is therapeutic. So you have to find those therapeutic moments, or whatever it is that allows you to get to neutral, right? If it's going for a run, if it's working out, if it's going for a walk. But first, having enough emotional intelligence and awareness to say, oop, yep, this isn't good. I need to reset. And then know that that's just part of how we react in high pressure situations. But great question. Yes. Great question. So the question is, for those online, what was some advice I got as a student? And for the record, if anybody, is there still like a 12 credit hour therapeutics course? Does that still exist? Well, imagine that if your dad is the professor, because that was my life. So I won't necessarily call this advice, because I think where my dad was brilliant was not putting pressure where he already knew pressure existed. He knew that it was tough on me being a student in his classroom in the most difficult class in PY3. He knew my academic record, and my academic record was solid, but I certainly wasn't an A+ student. And the reason I can say that out loud is I'm looking at my professors, and they know this, right? Like they have the records. I was not an A+ student, but it was never a study harder, be better type of message from my dad. It was and I've joked about this in the past, and I didn't say this in a lecture. It would be, and back in the day, tests were passed out, like handed back to you in a lecture like this. And his methodology, and I'll do it to my son right now, would be he would pass back the test, and if it wasn't up to his standard, it would just be swing by and see me. And there was no tension in that. It was just, yeah, I'll swing by and see you. And then he hooks me up with George Davis to go talk about pharmacokinetics. And that's what connectivity is. That's what mentorship is. That's what leadership is seeing the opportunity. He didn't just do it with me. He did it with everybody. Now, I'm kind of painting the picture of a jovial sailor. He was a hard ASS, if you know what I mean. A very, very difficult professor. That's driven. That's a great word. He was very driven, had very high standards, and wasn't shy about maintaining those standards, to the point of, you want to debate your grade? I'm happy to change it to lower. Am I wrong? If you want to debate your grade, he'd be the one that would regrade your test, and you may get a lower grade. Like, so much therapy just looking at Aaron Cook, because he and I were in the same class. That was the standard. That was the standard. Now, on top of that, and Mom and I were talking about this yesterday, when I made the decision to go into the commercial space versus clinical residency, and that was the path for me. It was April of 2020. I was interviewing for both. I was interviewing to go on to clinical residency, to follow what would have been his academic path, his clinical path. which I would have been incredibly proud to do here at the University of Kentucky. And at the same time, in parallel, I was interviewing with Johnson & Johnson and Eli Lilly. I was offered a job from Eli Lilly. I was waiting on the offer from Johnson & Johnson. And then ultimately, everything kind of came to fruition, and I was offered an opportunity that truly was remarkable to enter the marketing space directly out of the College of Pharmacy. Changed my life entirely. I will say that job, that entry point, created the opportunity for me to build upon my skills here at the College of Pharmacy and lead in a different way as a entry-level marketer with no marketing background. But again, being able to pull in all of the DNA. Now, was my dad upset about that? My mom would probably validate that, probably a little bit. Did he ever tell me that? Absolutely no. Absolutely no. Which is, I think, what I'm looking forward to in terms of my son Jack's story here is like, if he ends up coming into the commercial space, great. If he ends up being a 40-year professor at the University of Kentucky, fantastic. If he ends up being an entrepreneur, wonderful. But he'll figure that out just like all of you are figuring out what your path is going to be as well. Thank you for that question. Excellent. All right, guys, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Really do appreciate the opportunity to meet with everyone.